So imagine you're looking at a snapshot of a presidency, but not through the news headlines or like social media posts.
Right, the stuff we see every day.
Exactly. Imagine you're looking at it through the raw, unfiltered log of official actions taken over just a single week.
And that's what we have here.
Yeah, late April to early May 2026. Because on May 1st, the president essentially acted as a local zoning board for a single county in Montana, just greenlighting a private company's construction project.
Which is incredibly specific.
It is. And then just 3 days later, they used the exact same executive pen to unilaterally reshape America's foreign policy, like bypassing Congress entirely to freeze international assets.
Yeah, it's quite the pivot.
And they even baked a permanently adversarial list of media companies directly into the architecture of the official government website.
It's a staggering whiplash of authority, really. And when you look at it all laid out on a table, you realize that the most profound shifts in how the government operates and how it views you, the citizen, they don't usually happen in televised speeches.
Right. They happen behind the scenes.
Exactly. They happen in the quiet, dense, almost invisible bureaucratic plumbing.
And that is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to this exploration into the raw machinery of power. We are not looking at cable news chyrons today.
No spin, just the documents.
Right. We've pulled a highly specific stack of primary sources. It's the White House's official ledger of presidential actions, covering just 1 week.
And look, if you're listening to this on your commute or, walking the dog, you might hear the phrase official government ledger and feel your eyes instantly glaze over. I get it.
It sounds like homework.
It really does. Words like proclamation or presidential memorandum, they sound like the kind of dry historical dust you'd find in a basement archive. But this ledger is literally the steering wheel of the country.
It's the actual levers of power.
Yes. This is where we strip away the rhetoric and see, okay, who is getting tangible financial help, what actions are purely political messaging, and how is the executive branch actually spending its time when the cameras are off?
But before we get into the actual documents, and I mean, there is some truly wild stuff in here today, from foreign sanctions to a government initiative named after, like, an internet dog meme.
Oh, we definitely have to talk about that one.
We will, I promise. But first, we need to establish the rules of the game. Because looking at this stack on the desk, there's a whole alphabet soup of executive power here.
Yeah, there's a lot of different categories.
We got executive orders, proclamations, presidential memoranda, and something very niche called a presidential permit. So break this down for us mechanically. If you were sitting in the Oval Office, what is the actual functional difference between, say, pulling the executive order lever versus the proclamation lever?
Well, it's kind of like the difference between writing a strict new company policy and sending out a company-wide motivational email.
Okay, I like that analogy.
So an executive order, that is a legally binding directive. It's hard power. Think of the president as the CEO of the executive branch, which, employs millions of people.
Right, it's a massive workforce.
Exactly. When the president signs an executive order, they are legally compelling federal agencies, from the Department of Defense down to, like, the EPA, to act in a specific way.
So they have to follow it.
Yes, to use their budgets in a specific way, or enforce rules in a specific way. It carries the weight of law, assuming, of course, it draws its authority from the Constitution or a statute already passed by Congress.
So if the president signs an EO telling the Department of Transportation, hey, prioritize repairing bridges, the Secretary of Transportation legally has to pivot their entire bureaucracy to do exactly that.
Precisely. It literally turns the ship. Now, a presidential memorandum is a close cousin to the executive order. It also directs agency actions, but it's generally used for more routine, less sweeping administrative tasks.
Like day-to-day management stuff.
Right. It might not get published in the Federal Register with the same big fanfare, but it still binds the bureaucracy.
Okay, so EOs and memoranda are the gears grinding inside the machine. What about proclamations? Because we see a lot of those in this week's stack.
Historically, proclamations are outward-facing, and they're largely symbolic. They are the tool the president uses to speak directly to you, the public.
Like declaring a holiday or something.
Exactly. When the government wants to declare a national day of mourning or recognize a heritage month, they use a proclamation. It shapes national memory. It directs public attention. But it rarely changes the legal or financial landscape.
Rarely, but not never.
Right,
Oh,
well, exactly. And that is a massive however that we are going to explore deeply today.
yeah.
Because the line between a symbolic proclamation and a legally devastating foreign policy directive has become increasingly blurred.
Which we will absolutely see when we get to how the administration is handling Cuba later on. But wait, you left out the last one, the presidential permit.
Right, the permit. So the presidential permit is a very specialized, very sharp tool. It is an explicit, localized sign-off required for any infrastructure project that physically crosses an international border into the United States.
And that actually brings us right to the first document in our ledger for this week.
It does. Let's get into it.
Because I want to start with the action that has the most immediate, literal impact on the physical dirt and geography of the country.
The pipeline.
Yeah. We have an executive order and presidential permit dated May 1st, 2026. The title is, and it's a mouthful, authorizing Bridger Pipeline Expansion LLC to construct, connect, operate, and maintain pipeline facilities at the international boundary at Phillips County, Montana, between the United States and Canada.
So we just talked about the sweeping national power of the presidency, and here we see the absolute inverse. This is hyper-localized, granular power.
That's what instantly threw me when I read this. I'm looking at the title, and the President of the United States is personally signing off on an LLC's construction project in Phillips County, Montana.
Right.
I mean, Phillips County has a population of what, like a few thousand people maybe?
Right.
Why is the commander-in-chief acting like a municipal zoning commissioner for a single strip of land out west?
I know, it seems bizarrely specific until you zoom out and look at the legal concept of sovereignty.
Sovereignty. Okay, how does that apply to a trench in Montana?
Well, if you want to build a pipeline from, say, Texas to Oklahoma, you deal with federal regulators, state agencies, environmental boards, the usual domestic red tape. But the exact moment your steel pipe physically crosses the international border between the U.S. and Canada, it changes completely. It becomes a matter of national sovereignty.
Oh, because you're piercing the literal border of the country.
Exactly. The executive branch holds the ultimate authority to determine if that cross-border connection serves the national interest. So, even though this is literally just a trench being dug in Phillips County, Montana, the legal jurisdiction for altering the border belongs squarely on the resolute desk.
Okay, that makes sense structurally. But let's follow the money here. Because we always want to evaluate whether a government policy helps or hurts regular Americans, right?
Right, the actual effect versus the intent.
Yes. And when you read the text of this official ledger, the explicit named beneficiary isn't a demographic, is not a class of worker. It is a private corporate entity, Bridger Pipeline Expansion LLC.
That is the unavoidable mechanical reality of this specific document. When we assess the effect of this action, the primary immediate recipient of the government's help is a private business.
They get the golden ticket.
Yeah. The stroke of the executive pen instantly unlocks the ability for this LLC to expand its capital infrastructure, which ultimately means generating private profit.
Now, obviously the administration's argument, and to be fair, the traditional economic argument for these permits across many administrations is the secondary effect.
The economic ripple.
Right. They would say, yes, Bridger LLC gets the permit, but you, the American worker, get the temporary construction jobs, the local diners get the business from the crews, and the country gets increased energy supply.
And that is the classic trickle-down infrastructure argument. It's entirely valid to point out those secondary economic ripples. But if we are strictly analyzing the architecture of the ledger itself, we have to acknowledge that this is a stark, tangible authorization for corporate profit.
It's just right there in black and white.
It is. And it stands in total contrast to the broader, more abstract actions we're going to look at next. This isn't a messaging bill. This is the government saying, you, specific company, are cleared to build your private asset on the national border.
I want to spend a minute on the verbs used in this title, actually, because I think they're incredibly revealing about how power creates permanent realities.
Which verbs?
Construct, connect, operate, and maintain. If I'm just skimming the news, I just think, okay, the president approved the pipeline, cool. But those 4 words, they're a timeline.
Oh, absolutely. They map out the entire life cycle of a massive industrial asset. Let's break them down.
Okay.
So construct is the immediate temporary phase. That is the labor force, the heavy machinery, the pouring of concrete. It is a highly visible short-term economic burst.
Right. It's the hard hats and the ribbon cuttings.
Yeah.
It looks great on camera.
Exactly. Then you have connect. This is the geopolitical verb. Once you connect the Montana facilities to the Canadian side, you have effectively altered the utility of the international boundary. You've made the border porous for commerce.
It's no longer just a line on a map. It's like a vascular system for energy.
That is a great way to put it. And then, crucially, you have the final two verbs, operate and maintain.
The permanent ones.
This is the pivot. This transitions the project from a temporary building site into a permanent, decades-long economic operation. By signing a document that authorizes the operation and maintenance of this facility, the president isn't just approving a construction job for 2026.
They're locking it in for the future.
Yes, they are authorizing a permanent fixture in the American energy landscape that this private LLC will manage indefinitely.
It really highlights how a single signature on a Tuesday in May sets into motion a physical reality, like a steel pipeline buried in the earth that will outlast this administration, the next administration, and probably the one after that.
It is the ultimate manifestation of hard power.
So Bridger LLC gets the green light to lay steel and build physical infrastructure. But who is actually pouring the concrete, writing the software, and doing the daily labor for the massive federal side of these projects?
The government's workforce.
Right. And that brings us to the human cost of the ledger. Let's move from a physical pipeline to the human infrastructure of the United States government, specifically the massive workforce of federal contractors.
This is a huge sector.
Huge. We have an executive order from April 30, 2026, titled Promoting Efficiency, Accountability, and Performance in Federal Contracting.
This is a perfect pivot because we are moving from the localized physical reality of Montana to the sprawling bureaucratic reality of the federal labor force.
Right.
The federal government doesn't just rely on civil servants. It relies on an absolute army of private contractors to build weapons systems, manage IT networks, and, clean federal buildings.
And here is my primary issue with this document. The title is Pure Corporate Speak, Promoting Efficiency, Accountability, and Performance.
It sounds great in a press release.
Right. I mean, if you were an administration official, those are the safest buzzwords on the planet. Nobody in the history of politics has ever campaigned on, hey, vote for me, I'm promoting inefficiency, unaccountability, and poor performance.
Right. They're universally agreeable terms. Nobody debates them.
But wait, hold on. If I am a taxpayer listening to this, I want efficiency. I want accountability. Doesn't the government have a fiduciary duty to not waste my tax dollars?
Absolutely, they do.
So why is there a tension here? When we see these words applied to massive labor forces, what does that squeeze actually feel like for the regular American worker who relies on these federal contracts to feed their family?
You've hit on the central friction of federal management right there. We have to separate the intent from the effect. The intent is exactly what you just said, protecting the taxpayer, saving money.
Which is good.
Which is very good. But if we translate that corporate speak into operational reality on the ground, efficiency is almost always a polite bureaucratic synonym for budget tightening, for streamlining, or for outright cost cutting.
It means doing more with less.
Exactly. It implies finding ways to squeeze the same amount of output from fewer resources. So for you, the taxpayer, the intent is positive. But if you are a mid-sized federal contractor listening to this, or you're an employee working for one, efficiency often translates to frozen wages.
Ouch.
Or consolidated job roles, or immense pressure to deliver tighter turnarounds just to maintain the contract. The friction is absorbed by the worker.
Let's look at the other two words in the title, accountability and performance. If I'm running, say, a software company that builds databases for the Department of Veterans Affairs, what does an executive order demanding more accountability actually mean for my Tuesday afternoon?
Well, it usually means the implementation of strict new auditing metrics, compliance hurdles, endless reporting requirements. The government is demanding granular proof that their dollars are being spent perfectly, which, again, sounds fantastic on a press release.
But I'm guessing there's a catch for the little guy.
There is an enormous catch. Adding layers of accountability requires administrative overhead.
Meaning you have to pay people just to prove you're doing the job.
Exactly. If you are Lockheed Martin or Boeing, you have entire sprawling departments dedicated solely to federal compliance. You can absorb new accountability metrics without breaking a sweat. It's a rounding error for you.
But what if I'm not Boeing?
Right. If you are a 50-person cybersecurity firm in Ohio trying to secure a government contract, an order demanding stringent new performance audits might literally drown you in paperwork. You might not be able to afford the lawyers and the accountants to prove your accountability.
Wow. So ironically, an order designed to make the system perform better could inadvertently consolidate power into the hands of massive corporations, simply because they're the only ones big enough to afford the red tape.
That is frequently the unintended consequence of sweeping efficiency mandates. The intent is to protect public money, but the mechanical effect on the ground can be a brutal squeeze on smaller businesses and the everyday laborers working under those contracts.
So the big guys win again.
Often, yes. It is a zero-sum game of friction. You pull the lever labeled efficiency to save the Treasury $1 billion. But that friction has to go somewhere. It usually lands on the middle-class workers actually painting the ships or coding the software.
It is an incredible bait and switch when you look at just the title versus the mechanics.
Yeah, the wording is definitely deceptive if you don't know how to read it.
Okay. We just looked at how the government handles the people who work for it. Let's shift to how the government directly approaches your personal wallet.
This next one is fascinating.
On April 30, 2026, we see a proclamation. And the title is absolutely wild. It's called Promoting Retirement Savings Access for American Workers by Establishing TrumpIRA.gov.
This specific document raises one of the most interesting questions in modern governance. What happens when you merge the vast neutral infrastructure of the state with the mechanics of personal political branding?
Yes. Let's talk about the white labeling of the government.
Yeah.
Because that is exactly what this feels like. It is highly unusual to see a government financial portal named directly after the sitting executive.
Very unusual.
Usually the federal bureaucracy gives things incredibly sterile, boring, institutional names. Like it would be called the Federal Worker Retirement Access Portal, or I don't know, GovSave.
Right, GovSave. That's exactly how they normally do it. When you see a departure from that sterile norm, you have to ask what the strategic goal is.
If I can use an analogy here, it reminds me of how Nike operates. Nike doesn't actually own the factories that make the shoes. They own the swoosh.
The brand.
Exactly. They white label the manufacturing and slap their incredibly valuable brand on the final product. Here, the government is the vast, complex wholesaler of tax law and financial regulations. But the executive is slapping their personal, recognizable brand, their literal name, on the retail storefront where the citizen interacts with it.
That is a very apt comparison. By naming the portal TrumpIRA.gov, the administration is instantly turning a public utility into a personal brand extension. It fundamentally alters the dynamic between the citizen and the state.
How so?
Well, if you are an American worker navigating to this URL to figure out your tax-deferred savings, you are no longer just interacting with the Treasury Department or the IRS. You are actively interacting with a political identity.
But wait, mechanically, how is this happening? Notice that the ledger lists this as a proclamation.
Right.
It's not an executive order, and it certainly isn't a bill passed by Congress. A few minutes ago, you said proclamations were mostly for heritage months and symbolic gestures. Can a president just loudly declare a functional, legally binding financial portal into existence?
The short answer is no, not entirely from scratch. A president cannot use a proclamation to fundamentally rewrite the tax code. They can't alter capital gains taxes or magically invent new financial vehicles out of thin air.
Only Congress can do that.
Exactly. Only Congress has the power of the purse and the authority to actually change tax law.
So what exactly is TrumpIRA.gov if it isn't new law?
It is almost certainly an aggregator. The proclamation is directing the executive branch, likely the Treasury or maybe the Department of Labor, to utilize existing resources to build a centralized digital storefront.
Okay, I see.
It takes the confusing, already existing labyrinth of federal retirement options and curates them into one accessible, well-designed website.
So essentially a really well-branded directory.
Yes, but a highly effective one. The title explicitly states the target audience, American workers.
Which plays great politically.
It does. The framing is unapologetically aimed at helping regular Americans navigate the terrifying prospect of building personal wealth for retirement. The intent here, increasing access to retirement savings information, is objectively a positive utility for the public.
Right. Nobody's going to argue that making retirement information easier to find is a bad thing. We all want easier access to our money. But the packaging is the story here.
Exactly. The packaging ensures that every single time a citizen takes a positive step toward their own financial security, they are consciously engaging with the executive's political brand. It literally merges the psychological satisfaction of saving money with the administration's specific name.
It's brilliant marketing. But let me play devil's advocate on the branding strategy for a second.
Sure.
Does that name actually help usage? or does it hurt it? Because the country is heavily polarized. Everyone knows that. If you brand a genuinely helpful government resource with the name of a highly polarizing political figure, any figure, really do you inadvertently alienate half the workforce?
That's the gamble.
Like, do people who are politically opposed to the executive avoid a portal that might actually help their family's financial future, purely because the URL?
That is the calculated risk of this strategy. You are gambling that the overwhelming strength and loyalty associated with the brand will drive more traffic than a boring, neutral title like GovSave ever could.
You're leaning into the base.
Yes. You are trading institutional trust, which is dull, but universally accepted, for brand loyalty, which is volatile but highly motivating. It is a stunning blend of high-level statecraft and modern digital marketing.
Which is a perfect segue into our next document. Because if you thought using a proclamation to brand a retirement site was an aggressive use of executive tools, wait until you see how they use that exact same tool for international relations.
This is where the legal weight really shifts.
On May 4, 2026, we have a proclamation titled, "Imposing Sanctions on Those Responsible for Repression in Cuba and for Threats to United States National Security and Foreign Policy."
So we noted earlier that proclamations have historically been used for soft, symbolic power. This document is a profound escalation.
It's massive.
It really is. It demonstrates how a tool designed for public messaging can be weaponized for severe geopolitical consequences.
I have to admit, I was really confused when I saw this one. I always thought international sanctions were incredibly complex, strict legal mechanisms. You know, the Treasury Department freezing bank accounts, blocking shell companies, restricting trade routes, the heavy stuff.
Right.
Why is a severe, punitive international sanction framed as a proclamation? I mean, it's sitting in the exact same ledger right next to announcements for National Physical Fitness Month. It feels like a mismatch.
To understand this, we have to look at the invisible plumbing of foreign policy. You are absolutely right that the actual granular work of freezing a Cuban official's bank account happens in the Treasury Department. Specifically, an agency called the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC.
OFAC, okay.
They are the financial snipers of the government.
Yeah.
But OFAC cannot just freeze assets because they feel like it on a Wednesday. They need legal authorization.
They need a mandate.
Precisely. And usually that mandate comes from Congress. Or it comes from the president declaring a formal national emergency via an executive order under a specific law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act.
Which is a very formal, heavy process.
It is. Using a proclamation to impose sanctions is a much less common structural choice, but it serves a very specific, very loud rhetorical purpose.
Let's look at the language, because the wording is intense. It doesn't just say sanctions on Cuba. It says sanctions on those responsible for repression in Cuba and for threats to United States national security.
And that's the key.
It explicitly links a domestic human rights issue inside Cuba repression with a direct, active threat to the American homeland.
And that linkage is the entire legal and political key turning the lock. By officially, formally classifying the internal repression of Cuban citizens, not just as a tragedy, but as an active, ongoing threat to United States national security, the administration bypasses the need for a lengthy congressional debate.
Oh, wow. It changes the jurisdiction entirely.
Exactly.
If it's just a human rights issue, maybe Congress debates a trade embargo for 6 months. But if it's legally defined as a national security threat, the commander-in-chief can act unilaterally and instantly.
Exactly. The proclamation acts as the official, documented justification for whatever financial or diplomatic squeeze the Treasury Department then applies. And look, we aren't evaluating whether the specific policy toward Cuba is morally right or wrong. Here we are analyzing the mechanics of power.
Right, the tools they're using.
And the White House is taking the most public-facing, highly visible tool they have, the proclamation, and using it as a megaphone to legitimize punitive economic warfare.
It is foreign policy by megaphone. It signals to the international community, it warns the Cuban government, and perhaps most importantly, it demonstrates to domestic voters, especially in places like Florida, that the administration is taking immediate, hardline action without waiting for Congress to bicker about it.
It perfectly illustrates how modern executives stretch the boundaries of their tools. A proclamation can establish a retirement website on a Thursday and freeze international assets on a Monday.
It's wild flexibility. Which brings us perfectly to the most traditional, classic use of the proclamation tool. The shaping of national awareness, public memory, and what we might call the soft power of empathy.
The commemorations.
Yeah. If we look at the cluster of actions from late April and early May, There's an absolute barrage of commemorations.
Let's actually read them off because the sheer volume of them clustered together is important to understand how the administration manages the daily news cycle.
Okay, deep breath. We have Military Spouse Day. We have Victory Day for World War II. National Physical Fitness and Sports Month. Jewish American Heritage Month. National Fallen Firefighters Memorial Weekend. And National Foster Care Month.
It's a lot.
It's a ton. Now, when you look at the sheer volume of designated days and months, you have to ask the cynical question. Or rather, a frustrated taxpayer might ask. Does signing a piece of paper declaring it Foster Care Month actually do anything for a kid in the system?
It's a fair question.
Like, is this just cheap calendar filler? So the White House press office has something positive to tweet about today.
It is incredibly easy to dismiss these as mere political theater or calendar filler. But to do so fundamentally misunderstands how the bureaucratic nervous system of the federal government operates.
Go ahead, walk me through it.
It is true that these proclamations do not change a single law. They do not magically conjure new funding out of thin air, but they possess a deeply functional utility. Let's group them thematically to see the strategy.
Okay, if we sort them, there is clearly a theme of military and sacrifice. We have military spouses, Victory Day for WWII, and the Fallen Firefighters Memorial.
Right. This theme is about institutionalizing reverence. The government, representing the state, is officially recognizing the human cost of national security and public safety.
Honoring the fallen.
Exactly. Then you have the identity and community theme, Jewish American Heritage Month, and National Foster Care Month. And finally, a broad public health theme with National Physical Fitness and Sports Month.
Okay, but let's go back to the mechanics. What does declaring a month actually trigger? What happens inside the building when this gets signed?
A presidential proclamation provides a bureaucratic mandate. It is a starting gun. When the president officially declares National Foster Care Month, it sends a signal down the chain of command to agencies like the Department of Health and Human Services.
So it's not just a tweet.
Far from it. It authorizes them to utilize their existing discretionary budgets to run awareness campaigns. It means a graphic design team at HHS is cleared to spend hours building resource portals. It means federal grants regarding foster care are suddenly pushed to the front of the public relations queue.
Wow, okay.
It focuses the incredibly diffuse, scattered energy of the federal government onto a specific, vulnerable population for 30 straight days.
So it's about forcing visibility.
It is about visibility, and fundamentally, it is about dignity. We talked earlier about assessing whether these orders help causes like healthcare, education, or dignity for all. These proclamations are the primary vehicle for that dignity, acknowledging the silent sacrifice of a military spouse, honoring the generational resilience of Jewish Americans amid rising anti-Semitism, or recognizing the complex trauma of youth in the foster care system. These actions provide official historical validation.
It is a massive contrast to where we started today. Think about it. The power to authorize a pipeline in Montana is hard power. It moves earth, it moves capital, and it creates corporate profit.
Very tangible.
But the power to declare Foster Care Month is soft power. It moves attention, it moves empathy, and it provides a mandate for social workers.
A presidency cannot function purely on sanctions and infrastructure. If it did, it would be a sterile, terrifying machine. It must also act as the curator of what the nation values, what it mourns, and what it remembers. Both hard power and soft power are absolutely essential to maintaining the legitimacy of the office.
That's a really profound way to look at it. All right, we have spent this entire time analyzing the documents themselves. We have looked at the hard power of pipelines, the bureaucratic squeeze of contracting, the branded retirement portals, the foreign sanctions, and the curation of public memory.
You've covered a lot of ground.
But for this final section, I want to completely zoom out. I want to stop looking at the pieces of paper, and I want to look at the actual binder holding these documents.
You're talking about the digital architecture, the White House website itself.
Yes, because if you look closely at the source material we pulled for this week, we don't just have the text to the ledger. We also captured the website navigation elements.
The menus, the headers.
Exactly, the menus, the headers, and the footers that sit above and below these official documents online. And what we found is that the interface of the site contains its own quiet, incredibly powerful executive declarations.
The navigation menu of an official government website is a direct reflection of the administration's absolute core priorities. It is prime institutional real estate. Every single pixel is a deliberate choice.
Okay, let's look at the navigation bar and the footer. We have links for initiatives like Save America, WH Wire, Freedom 250, Working Families Tax Cuts, AI.gov, and DOGE.
Which is quite the list.
But I want to draw your attention, and if you are listening to this right now, I want you to imagine you are scrolling down the official whitehouse.gov homepage on your phone. You scroll past the news, you scroll past the photos, and you hit the media section of the site footer at the very bottom.
The standard footer.
Right. You have standard, boring things. News, gallery, video library. And then right below that, nested in the official federal code, you have a link titled Media Offenders.
When you isolate that and look at it mechanically, it is a stark, unprecedented inclusion for an American government platform.
It is a massive, screeching record scratch moment. What is practically happening here? Imagine you are a high school civics student. You are on the official White House domain looking up the proclamation for Jewish American Heritage Month for a homework assignment.
It's very normal activity.
You scroll to the bottom of the page, right next to the privacy policy and the contact us button, and there is an official government link classifying certain journalists or networks as media offenders.
We have to spend some time dissecting the implications of this because it represents a profound departure from traditional bureaucratic neutrality. Historically, the executive branch's digital presence is utilized to disseminate neutral information, promote legislative initiatives, and provide basic constituent services.
It's supposed to be politically sterile.
Exactly. By creating a formalized structural category called media offenders on the official domain, the government is utilizing its institutional weight to codify its grievances with a free press.
It is essentially creating a government-sponsored ledger of unfavorable media entities. But it's doing it permanently. It's not a temporary statement.
Exactly. Think about it like a monument. When the government builds a physical statue of a general in a park, they are making a permanent physical declaration of what they revere.
Right.
When an administration bakes the category of media offenders into the HTML footer of every single page on the White House website, they are building a digital monument to an adversarial press relationship.
That is wild. It is fundamentally different from a politician complaining about a news network during a rally or a press secretary arguing with a reporter in the briefing room. Those are fleeting moments. You forget about them the next day. But this is baked into the architecture of the state.
It formalizes an adversarial relationship into a static official government menu. It communicates to every citizen who visits the site that identifying and labeling enemies in the media is a core structural function of the executive branch.
It normalizes it.
Yes.
Okay.
It elevates a political grievance to the exact same administrative level as providing a video gallery or publishing a treaty. It touches directly on the tension between executive communication and foundational First Amendment norms.
And it doesn't stop with the footer. Let's look at the main initiative section in the top navigation bar. We have a blend of what I would call traditional government policy verticals and highly modern, deeply colloquial initiatives. We have working families, tax cuts, and AI.gov. Those feel like standard governance.
AI.gov makes perfect logical sense. It serves as a centralized hub for the nation's technological and regulatory strategy regarding artificial intelligence. It signals to the tech industry and the public that the government is trying to keep pace with innovation. It is standard, forward-thinking bureaucracy.
But sitting right next to AI.gov in the primary initiatives menu is DOGE.
That is a fascinating, almost surreal juxtaposition of tones.
What could DOGE represent in this context? Because if you ask any average internet user in 2026 what Doge is, they will tell you it is a picture of a Shiba Inu dog that became a massive internet meme, and then it was turned into a highly volatile cryptocurrency.
Right, Dogecoin.
Why is an internet meme a top-level initiative on the architecture of the United States government?
There are a few operational possibilities here, and all of them represent a radical shift in how the government frames its actions. The first possibility is that it is a forced acronym for a new agency or economic initiative. Perhaps something like the Department of Government Efficiency.
Wait, like the efficiency executive order we talked about earlier with the federal contractors?
Precisely. Imagine they take a dry, painful, bureaucratic cost-cutting measure, which usually means firing people or slashing budgets, and they brand it with the acronym DOGE to play off the populist internet meme.
Oh, that's clever.
It would be a way to make bureaucratic bloodletting seem culturally relevant, funny, or disruptive to a specific online demographic.
It's wrapping a bitter pill in internet irony.
Yes. The alternative possibility is that it implies a literal integration of digital assets and cryptocurrency frameworks into the federal unilateral agenda. If the administration is elevating a specific cryptocurrency meme to the level of a primary White House initiative alongside artificial intelligence and tax cuts, it is an incredible blending of populist internet culture with high-level statecraft.
It makes you realize that this navigation menu acts as a permanent, implicit executive order all on its own. It dictates the terms of engagement. It frames how every single citizen interacts with the executive branch's digital presence.
The medium is the message?
Exactly. Think about the friction here. If you are a small business owner and you go to the site just to find out about a new federal contracting rule, you are forced to mentally navigate past a campaign slogan like Save America, an adversarial list of media offenders, and an internet meme like Do OGE.
The interface dictates the experience. The administration is telling you before you even read a single policy document, before you even click on a proclamation or an executive order, exactly what worldview they operate from.
They're setting the stage.
They are demanding that the citizen engage with their political branding in order to access basic, taxpayer-funded government information.
It fundamentally changes what we expect a government website to look like. It is no longer just a dry, passive repository of laws and press releases. It has been transformed into an active, aggressive, and highly curated political environment.
So, if we step back and synthesize everything we have covered in this exploration today, we have looked at a mere 7 days of executive action. Just one single week in May 2026.
And in just those 7 days, we see the absolute staggering breadth of what the presidency actually does. We have seen the executive branch act as an international zoning board, personally granting a corporate LLC the right to alter the physical border in Montana for corporate profit.
While regular workers hope for the trickle-down jobs.
Right. We have seen it act as a marketing agency, creating TrumpIRA.gov, to merge the deeply personal act of wealth building with a political naming convention.
We've seen it leverage the rhetoric of national security to unilaterally bypass Congress and impose economic sanctions on Cuba via a proclamation.
We have seen it act as the curator of public memory and empathy, dispensing dignity to military spouses, fallen firefighters, and youth in the foster care system.
And finally, we've seen it weaponize its own digital architecture, placing standard initiatives like AI.gov right next to structurally adversarial categories like media offenders and populist memes like Do OGE.
It is a machine that operates on physical dirt, on global economics, on human emotion, and on digital reality simultaneously.
It is a profound reminder that executive power isn't just about the massive, sweeping laws that get debated on cable news. True power is often found in the thousands of small, granular actions, the hyper-specific permits, the cleverly worded proclamations, and the subtle shifts in digital menus that happen every single week, mostly out of the spotlight.
Which brings us to a final thought I want to leave you, the listener, with today. We started this investigation by talking about how looking at this ledger is like looking at the underlying code of a machine.
Right.
But when we read these official government documents, it becomes glaringly clear that the most important story often isn't just the policy itself, but the container that policy is placed in. If the official, taxpayer-funded digital home of the executive branch places a vital technology initiative like AI.gov and a politically weaponized list like media offenders in the exact same navigational hierarchy, how does that fundamentally change our expectations of what a government is supposed to be doing with its time?
It blurs the line between public service and political warfare.
We expect the X-ray of the government to show as a clean, binary picture of public service. But when you look at the raw ledger, the picture isn't clean at all. It is deeply complex, it is heavily corporatized, it's highly branded, and it is permanently evolving to demand your attention.